The National Energy Regulator is meeting in Cape Town today to conduct public hearings into a possible Eskom tariff hike. Eskom is pushing for almost a 17% tariff increase from April. Energy analyst Chris Yelland joins us on the line now to discuss this further. Chris, thank you so much for joining us and good to have you on. Let's start off with this. How exactly did Eskom come to this figure of 16.6% in its application?
Okay, look, the starting point, of course, is that Nersa has already granted Eskom an 8% increase from the 1st of April in terms of the multi-year price determination for the 5-year period ending 1st of April 2018. So that's a given, this 8% increase on the 1st of April this year. Eskom have now submitted an application in terms of the regulatory clearing account mechanism for a further increase, which, if granted, will mean that the increase will be a total of nearly 17%, as you said. Of course, there is no guarantee or assurance that Nersa will grant Eskom what it has applied for. And that is the job of Nersa, to look carefully at Eskom's application and only to grant it what it rightfully deserves. There are two aspects to the application. The first is for extra costs over and above what Eskom budgeted for, and these would be costs that would be outside of Eskom's control, and in this particular case it's diesel. Extra costs of diesel that they did not budget for and that they have had to purchase. The other major cost, or the other major amount that they're trying to recoup through this price increase, is their reduced sales volume, their reduced energy sales. And the job of Nersa is to decide whether these increased diesel costs are outside of Eskom's control or are a result of their own inefficiency or negligence or poor performance. Similarly with the reduced sales volumes. Were these reduced sales volumes simply the economy, or were they perhaps reduced sales volumes due to Eskom's own poor performance? And certainly it's my view that Eskom are not going to get exactly what they asked for, but may be somewhat reduced by Nersa, which would mean that the increase is going to be somewhere between 8% and 17%.
Chris, let's talk a little bit about the issue of reduced sales that you touched on there. Now, South Africans are celebrating about 5 months without power cuts. Eskom is, how much, shall we say, does this have to do with Eskom's efficiency in terms of the war room it's set up and the interventions Brian Molefe has made? And how much of this is based on simply the state of the economy right now, where mining and manufacturing companies are simply struggling in this climate and therefore have reduced their demand for power?
Well, I think it's a combination of a number of factors. Certainly the international demand for commodities, especially from China, is down, and this is impacting on prices for commodities, and it's also impacting on demand for the commodities, which means reduced sales from South Africa, which means that these different smelters that produce some of these commodities, whether it's steel, whether it's ferrochrome, ferromanganese, or other commodities, are reducing their production volumes and thereby reducing their demand for electricity. There are, of course, other factors, and there is no doubt that Eskom's load shedding, and here you must remember we're talking about last year. Eskom's load shedding last year certainly impacted on demand for electricity, and also their inability to supply has resulted in the deferment of many large mining projects and metals projects. So I think there's a combination of Eskom's own performance as well as its own urging of customers to reduce their usage of electricity is all having an impact, but the international climate also has an impact as well.
Well, let's talk about this reduced demand in terms of what consumers are and some businesses are doing. It seems to be happening on a very small scale at this point, but a lot of people have decided that clean energy is the way to go, resorting to use solar power or perhaps gas instead of the product that Eskom is selling. Now, if we see a greater uptake of this, how is it going to affect Eskom's business model?
Well, it's going to affect it in a very serious way. You see, as Eskom pushes up its prices like this, So people switch to alternative energy sources, and you've pointed out renewable energy sources, but also people look to energy efficiency and to other options to reduce their electricity consumption. And of course, they're doing this because Eskom is urging them to do it, because the price is giving out a very strong pricing signal that they should reduce electricity consumption. And of course, people are finding it difficult to afford, not only the person in the street, but also business, industry, mining, etc. Now, as people use less electricity, so Eskom is entitled to ask the regulator for an increased price in order to compensate for this loss of sales revenue. And of course, as they put up the price, so demand for electricity reduces further. And we get into this negative spiral of increasing prices and declining electricity demand. And this is something we have got to break out of because ultimately it leads to an unsustainable business model in this environment.
Now, if what you're saying is true, is it worth investing in all the coal-fired power stations we're already working on and the nuclear ones which may well be in the pipeline? Or are we just in a temporary slump now which may end soon and require additional energy in the years to come?
The trouble with this sector and many industrial sectors is the cyclical nature of supply and demand and the lag between building new plants, lagging behind the demand for electricity. And it's quite conceivable that we could go into a period of surplus electricity generation capacity if demand for electricity continues to decline as it is at the moment as a result of the international and the local economic environment. And we've seen this in the past, this boom and bust, where we either have got too much generation capacity or too little, and it does seem to go in cycles, and it's quite possible that it could happen again.
Thanks so much for your analysis there. Energy analyst Chris Yelland on the line to us.